We got a list of questions that Chuck put together here that are potentially asked in these head coaching interviews. Worth a listen to.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you to this point in your career? Standard interview part, I think that's standard stuff. What would you say is your leadership management philosophy? How long does that one normally take? That's got to be a good 20, 30-minute conversation right there.
Yeah, especially if, they want to give theirs before. Like if Jim starts sharing a little bit of his.
What would he say?
No, we don't need to get into that.
Long
We don't have
bathroom
time.
break.
No, it might, but no, that could go a while.
A lot of these are pretty open-ended. What is your vision? I mean, that's
about as open-ended as it gets.
And if you don't give a thorough answer there, do they think you're kind of opting out and cheating it a little bit, potentially? How do people get to work? How do you get people to work together and buy into one vision for the team? Once again, this is a full 10 to 15-minute answer that you probably have to give.
Well, remember us, it was in the team room, right? It's team, right? Team first, self second, serve others. We had our core values, but you share the vision. You said vision, right? You share your vision. You talk about your culture, what your identity is going to be, and then you have to rally. You have to be able to inspire and motivate and bring an organization, a locker room, a football team, whoever's left, because they're taking over, not, teams that have done bad.
Yeah.
You remember the locker room I stepped into, right?
Yeah, we're
Everybody
ranked
was gone,
32
right?
out of 32
Right.
that year. Would you keep the current staff? That's a question that Sean Payton's going through right now. D'Amico's going through. Coaching staff hires / candidates if you were to hire new people. What does being a player's coach mean to you? Oh, AJ, that's a big one there.
Chuck, could you ever come back and be like, hey, that's a stupid question. I'm not even going to answer it? Would they appreciate your honesty?
I mean, if you really wanted that job, I don't think you would do that,
Who's all in here?
But you could give certainly, you could reframe it, to your point.
I'm just wondering, how do you not
Hey,
sound
you
like
could-
one of these, like an internet guru? How do you not sound like an internet person that tries to inspire people and be all cliche about it?
Or do you need to sound like that?
Yeah.
I hope not.
So what you do is when they ask you a question, then you can go on a diatribe, if you will, or you could just share a lot of stuff and talk for a long time and try to cover as many of the questions and many of the bases you can as far as your vision, what your culture is going to be, your identity, your staff, and just kind of go and hopefully answer a bunch of the things that they have, so you may not have to, answer a question that you may think is like, where'd you come up with this thing?
Who's all in the room normally?
So usually, there's so much virtual now. You see these people interviewing so many people that, the first week, they're doing all these virtuals, and so there's, who knows who's on that one. But when it comes down to it and the nitty gritty and you're going to make a decision, owner's going to be in there, general manager for sure, maybe a COO. There might be somebody else within the organization. It might be like a head trainer. It might be like Brian Decker, somebody, anybody who's got a seat at the
Who's Brian Decker? I don't think I know Brian Decker.
He's like the mental guy over there at the Colts.
Oh, okay.
So there's got to be some people. You might have if you have a guy like David, a player engagement guy. Just you want to put as many guys and eyes on this guy as you can. So when he leaves the building, what'd you think? What'd you think? What's your perception? What's your idea of this guy? So you can get as many people rather than just. The guys that are going to make the decision are going to make the decision, but you'd like to get as much feedback as you can.
Do you think the players have to? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, they should have Frog. Should run this guy down.
That's not a bad idea. That's equipment manager. Do you think the players have to like you? Do you want them to like you? Oh, here we go. How do you gain respect of the players or the staff? How do you turn a losing attitude around? How do you integrate tradition, D-Butt? How do you integrate tradition? That's a great question. That's an impossible thing to answer.
Especially coming in as a new coach. It's tough. I don't know.
Educate him on you got to educate him on the history and the tradition of this great franchise. That's what
Paint
you
over all the great
When I went to Chicago with Matt Nagy, one of the first meetings when the players came back and the new players, that's all he did was talk about George Stanley Hallis, okay, Virginia Hallis, who's in the building. So he educated him to AJ's point of the history and rich tradition, and he made the guy. It's like those players, AJ Brown. I got to learn the fight song for the Eagles, right? He didn't know it, but that's part of the deal. If you really want them to, live and breathe and die with that tradition, they got to learn stuff like that.
Bill kind of did that with the players that you were currently playing with as rookies, I know for coming in, like you had to know, like fucking Matt Light, like who he is, like he that was a big thing for him. Not necessarily the Steve Grogan or those guys. You were learning about that being there, but that was from the first time you came into a meeting room, you'll have certain pictures of certain players around the room, and you definitely need to know your teammates.
So, remember what Ted did? Monachino,
okay.
like when he came in, and it was mostly for the young players, but he would highlight some of the players in the room, like Robert Mathis, and he would talk about what they've done, how long they've been there, all the numbers that he had, the type of teammate he was, type of player, and then show a highlight tape of him. And then he would do it with Pat, just to build the tradition of the defense.
I remember Ted
Freeney,
Monachino.
Freeney, he did Freeney, he'd do Mathis, all the former greats.
Manusk.
Gary Brackett.
Oh, Gary Brackett, GB. What a legend that guy was. Is there a key ingredient to a championship team besides talent? That's a great question. Player leadership, do you think it is natural or can it be developed? And how? That's a tough fucking. Do you just say situations or situational there, AJ? I mean, how do you even?
I would say that for a lot of these questions, you might have to say situations or situations.
How about this competitiveness? Do you think it's natural or do you think it can be developed? I mean, I don't fucking know.
I mean, you could go on for days for every one of these questions.
How do you motivate? Give examples, all right? How do you discipline? Give examples. How do you handle benching a player, especially when it's a high draft pick? And can you do that? I think is the follow-up. Right there, Chuck?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It can be handled a lot of different ways, and you can answer that one in a lot of different ways. And you can try to give an example. If you got an example of a guy that you worked with, a former coach, and this is how they did it, and this is how I do it.
Jeez. How do you build confidence with your players? If you praise in public, do you criticize in public? Ooh. What do you look for in a player? How do you handle crisis situations? How do you handle first-time offenders? What does accountability mean to you?
That's a good one.
AJ? What does accountability
These are good. I want to ask Chuck, how did you prepare to go in and have one of these head coaching interviews? What do you do?
You remember me talking about, my the time that I had to come here for this interview? We just got off that, championship game, and it wasn't, 15 hours later that pretty much on a plane going. I was scrambling to try to get a notebook together. Okay, what do you think I'm going to need? Well, they're going to want to know, okay, what's your yearly book, all right? So training camp, what's your training camp schedule? What's a typical practice plan look like? What are the preseason games going to be like? How are you going to play the players in the preseason? So you try to go a calendar year and have a book set on all that stuff. And then you talk about, be ready for, if it's a specific team, obviously, okay, where are they at? Where are we at with quarterback? We know Peyton Manning had the neck, didn't play. What's the future look? Obviously, we had luck. It was there in the draft. So you have to know their roster. You have to be able to talk about their roster, the changes you'd make. Would you keep this guy? Would you get rid of this guy? All these issues that these guys are coming into with, especially the quarterback, you better have answers, for the big ones.
When you're putting that plan together, you reach out to former head coaches, or is that just your agent helping you out with that? Who helps you put that?
You try to have a plan. Most of these guys now have an agent and have these books growing, and guys that have been around. I basically just, Harbaugh got the Baltimore job.
Yep.
He brought the Andy Reid book with him, how they practiced, when they practiced, who did what. So that book was together. So I'm scrambling everything that he had, what I was familiar with, what I had done for the last 4 years. And so we just kind of, it's a copycat league. You just kind of bring those in there and say, this is how we're going to do it. And then when you have to adjust, you adjust.
Did you have to have your coordinators and everything already? Did they ask you that, or because you were going in and BA and all of them were still there?
No, this was so quick. They were just trying to get to know me and get a feel for who I was. Yeah. And mostly that type of thing. But now you have to have an idea when they bring you in there, like when I interviewed at some other spots, who's going to be OC. Yeah. If you don't get him, who's B? Who's plan B? Who's number C? So you better be 3-4 deep at each position, especially at the coordinator spots.
Discuss one of the best decisions you have ever made. Is that life or football?
Married Tina.
There you go. What keeps you up at night? Here's a question. What keeps you up at night? Are there any decisions you regret? Can also use as failure answer. What is your weakness? Where can you improve? Well, I work too hard.
Yep.
Yeah,
Care too much. Care too much. Work too hard. Yeah.
That's obviously what it is. What are the specific traits that make you qualified to be a head coach? I feel like that matters. What was your first thought when you heard you were being considered for the head coaching position. I was so excited, wasn't I? I was so excited, so pumped, thankful, honored, the whole thing.
Humbled by the whole deal.
Well, what makes you the best candidate for this position? What makes you different or better than any other candidate for this position? What a question. What a series of events. That could go on for 10, 12 hours, I guess.
For multiple interviews.
And if you don't give a full answer, they think you're copping out of it. It's an interesting game.
I got a question though, Chuck. Does Chuck know of anyone like getting outside of the box and trying to really learn what a guy's like? What if they said, "Hey, let's go play 18 holes," and you play golf with the GM or some of the decision makers? Does that ever happen?
So great story.
Great.
Cap, the old coach, quarterback that was head coach at Cal, way back when, Joe Cap. You guys remember this guy?
Yeah. No.
Sure.
Yeah.
You bet.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
great competitor,
Yeah.
war daddy, tough as hell. Played for the Vikings, I believe, if you look it up. Somebody,
Oh,
Zito,
Joe
help me
Cap.
with that.
Joe Cap.
So he's the head coach of the Cal Bears.
Cap.
And a guy that I worked with, John Goff at Boise State, 1987, 88. He was our DC.
Jerry.
He worked for Joe. He went on an interview, offensive line coach. So he goes in there, he sits down with Joe, shakes his hand. He's in his office. He said, "Hey, blah, blah, blah." They're in there 2 minutes, and he says, "Did you bring some gear?" He's like, "Excuse me, coach?" He goes, "Did you bring some workout gear?" He goes, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Go get dressed." Next thing they know, they were on a basketball court, and they were playing one-on-one.
Yes.
And it was all to figure out if this guy had toughness, was a competitor, what his grit was like. That was that.
This is what Sirianni would do if you had an
Yeah.
That's what
opportunity.
they should do.
Love that.
I think it's not a bad idea.
Yes.
I think that's when you can really see if people respond. Are you just sitting down in this room and everybody's staring at you, or how does it normally go?
That's it. Just like this. Here I am.
Kind of like the combine.
I was going to say the stories that are coming out of Cleveland about the guys who go and do their entire pre-draft thing.
What's that?
I think it was Ben Watson, and there was one other guy, and they basically had one person basically like sitting across the table from Chuck, if Chuck was the player, spotlight on this one dude, head coach, GM, owner, in like a dark corner of the room, and they're asking this guy like, "Have you ever done drugs before? You ever smoked dope before?" And just to see what his reaction was.
Could you imagine? Yeah, I have. Thank you. You guys could just sit here.
Yeah.
You
But
guys,
it was-
like, to your point, though, if you give like an honest answer, will they respect it or hate it?
I lied.
They should know the answer before they ask it, though.
I lied.
Well, you heard the one where they went up and grabbed the guy's
Yeah,
wrist, right?
see his pulse to
So
see
do
if
you-
it
you ever-
changed
you ever
after
smoke
that.
dope?
Yeah.
And the guy started drop his, as soon as they dropped their eyes, no, I've never done that. Like, okay. He goes, no. Pull up. Give me your hand. Give me your wrist. I was reading a book on a plane trip over here. It's telling me about, when you're lying, look me in the eye. Let me see your eyes. Pupils dilate and your heartbeat quickens. He had him by the wrist.
I'm nervous, coach.
Who was this? An owner, a coach, a GM?
I don't know. That's what the story is. I don't know who was doing the interview and who was asking that question, but that's how they did, old boy.
That's amazing.
unbelievable.
Because to your point, AJ, which I wonder if you were to tell him what does accountability look like to you? It's like, what's the situation? What happened? Who went where? Who decided to do it? How did we draft this person? How much money did we pay this person? Who did we not know this person was potentially going to have this type of effect on the team whenever we got them? There's so many just realistic answers to all these things that I assume if you were to give those answers, you'd get kicked right out of the room. Is that what we assume? Are these all fake right answers you're giving for all these things?
Hey, look, these scouts go to these campuses, and they've been in there, and they've watched these guys from freshman, sophomore, so they know these guys. They know the red flag. You can waste the entire 15 minutes on something that is stupid as hell, rather than figuring out, okay, what's this guy's football character and what's his football IQ?
No, I agree. But in the interview for the head coach, there's a lot of shit in here.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many situations.
Candid answer.
How do you handle? How do
That's
you?
what they want to know, I guess. They want to know how would Chuck separate himself from other candidates? I guess how you interpret the question and how you answer it. That's what they're trying to figure out. But if they're going 10, 12 hours, I'm not interviewing many people.
How do you turn around a losing attitude? It's I don't know.
Can I ask you one?
Who'd we lose to?
Here's one owner. Can I ask you this one?
Yeah.
Okay, one owner asked potential head coach this. He said, okay, first 100 hours on the job, what are you going to do with them?
What is this first
like
100
that.
days of presidency?
I like that question.
I'm going to hope that you would invest a little bit more money in that locker room so we don't look like an amateur league. That's what I would do in the first hour or two. Then I'm walking right down to the general manager's office, and I'm saying, we need this guy off this team, we need this guy on this team, and we need this guy on this team. That's an interesting thing. 100 hours, what's that, 4 days?
Yeah.
First 4 days. Well, I'm probably going to move into my office.
Yeah, right.
Get my family out
Yeah,
here.
figure out where I'm living.
Got to get a little bit better water pressure. I'm a big dumper, so don't want to be clogging
The first thing that's
toilet.
come to your mind, okay, like staff, right? You're going to spend a lot of time, like you talked about staffs, okay, are they going to keep guys? So you got to sit down and interview who's there. They're going to give you, if they give you the job, they're going to say, we'd really love you to talk to Coach A, B, C, and D. You don't have to keep them, but
AB?
please talk to them. You know, guys that are still there, they haven't let go. This guy's really good. We'd love you to, so you're going to spend time doing that. But really what it comes down to is, like, there's 53, 60, whatever there is on the roster, futures, practice squad guys, is this owner's opinion was the way I'd do it, because there's a lot of ways to go about that, like you were thinking, is I'd spend the first 60 hours getting to know my teammate, my players. I'd try to spend an hour
Sharpen the axe.
with each guy and start to build that relationship with the roster, with the players.